It is really a pleasure to be here after this break, after my little sing-along song moment. And also to be here as a mid-career artistic researcher of digital resolutions. And I say that mid-career because I'm kind of proud that I made it so far, but it's also kind of with aversion because I miss the times when things were just fun, you know, when you could just play around, everything was wrapped in newness, and digital art was not a career yet, right? There was literally no career in digital. It was all just explorations, experimentations, and there was no such thing as doing things wrong yet or to lose. So today, I'd like to say digital art is still some type of fun and games, but there's a lot more at stake now. And I think it's because care slipped in. I care now. So it's not a simple type of care. It's like woven into all the layers of what I'm doing. It's about my practice, but also my practice has become care. So sometimes I wonder if you could gamify care, and I think you could, but I don't think this is what it is about for me. Care has become some type of gravity of responsibility. I'm responsible now for what I make in the world, what I bring to my students, etc. So when I wrote the proposal for this workshop, I really had to reevaluate what care means in my practice, what it means to me, and that really wasn't that easy. But I did find this really wonderful book, which is by Maria Puig de la Bella Casa, who writes about care. She writes, "To care can feel good, but it can also feel awful." Everyone knows that when you care, it feels sometimes you just want to fall on the ground, right? It can do good, but it can also be oppressive. It's an essential character to humans and countless living beings. It makes it all the most susceptible to convey control. But she also asks, what is care? Is it affection? Is it a moral obligation? Is it work or a burden? Is it a joy? Sometimes we can learn or practice care, or sometimes we just do it. Care means a lot of different things to a lot of different people in different situations. So while ways of caring can be identified, researched or understood, concretely or empirically, care is in essence ambivalent. It is a significant and an ontology, and then it's end of quote. This is a book, if you want it, I can pirately share it with you. So, as I said, while care has slipped into all my levels of my practice, it's also still nebulous. It's a lot of things. I have care to give, I receive care, and I feel care, I take care. Care is everywhere, and I'm mostly aware of care when I actually fail. And that's when I come eye to eye the most. When I fail, I know that I cared. So as an artistic researcher, now working in the field of media art for some time, with a dedicated practice, I'm also constantly dealing with things failing on me, falling in disrepair and failing on me. I've cut my presentation in 4 parts to keep some kind of cadence, kind of flow, kind of like we're not totally dying after food and swimming. I will first draw a bridge to my first moments here at Nîmes in 2022, I think. It was during a bibliothèque workshop, which is funny that I'm coming from a bibliothèque workshop and now I'm in a care for archiving workshop, and those are only kind of tangentially related to my own practice. Then I would like to draw a bridge between my larger practice as a research-based artist. Then I have an intermezzo for you. And finally, I will talk about a new research I'm doing about archiving, which is kicked off this summer, and it goes under the name the Transfer Data Trust. So we're building actually a decentralized archive. I'm very aware that a few of us have tried and failed. I think it's nice that the newer generation is trying again. Let's see what happens. And this is kind of an archive and also toolkit for peer-to-peer conservation and care. So here we are. This is where I was sitting the first time. It's kind of like where Helene is sitting now, I think. It's my leg. My first visit of NEAM workshop was in the summer of 2022, which was for a workshop that was organized by Nathan Jones and Sam Skinner. And it was focusing on how to critically engage and radically reimagine what it means to read, write, organize, and distribute knowledge and information. So from that came a soon-to-be-published, hopefully, book, which is also called Bibliothèque. This is my kind of part in that publication. What you see here is the Prelinger Library. So the Prelinger Library is a library in San Francisco. And it's not a typical library. It holds many special collections, magazines, zines, buttons, maps, license plates, scrapbooks, and so forth. It's kept by Rick and Megan Prelinger, and they are the founders of this, what they call Library of Serendipity. And I want to always stop for a moment at the word serendipity, because I think we're missing a lot of that in our current archives. There's not so much space for serendipity in the way we structure our archives in the digital. So the Prelinger Library made me reconsider my own practice of collecting. And in NEAM, I actually, in 2022, so for the few of you who were there then, I actually presented this. It was my collection of collections folded inside a library. So for a very quick reference, this is a traditional collection of Finite set. It's a category that includes objects like stamps, coins, panini stickers. These are collections that involve well-defined sets. Then there are traditional collections of non-finite or permutating artifacts, and these are not limited. So they may change over time. They come from objects I collected and that spoke to me during my childhood and that I keep collecting today. Then there are naive or sentimental collections. These collections consist of objects I cannot seem to throw away. Collections that function as an abstract or an essence of a space. So these are collections that could include objects that represent a place or a memory. And believe me, I have a full shelf of Cyprus at home, all random things. Then there are objects that are more than just an object. So these include objects that have a cultural symbolic value, for instance, a prince that has not been kissed, or a wishbone that has not been broken yet. There are also a collection of unclaimed objects. Then there is the overview. If you want to know more, you can also look at it online. These collections often stem from the desire to capture something, to pin it down or to make it tangible, but it is always impossible to fully capture these objects and what they represent, because their sum becomes more than the individual items themselves. The objects have become more of a conduit for imagination. So they've become like a kind of a cosmos in which you can imagine, wonder, etc. So after Bibliothèque and this kind of publication that is still not in the world yet, I was invited by the Institute of Network Cultures out of Amsterdam, by Geert, to take part of his, or their, new series, The Void, which is a video podcast and research project on the role of tactical video and audiovisual publishing in practical-based research, which made me have to reformulate how I perceive a connection between collecting, research, and the archive, right? Because they're all closely related, they overlap, but they're not the same. So in research, at least to me, I always start with casting a very wide net. So I'm going on the internet, I'm trying to find a lot of different angles towards a subject, for instance. And in order to gather all these objects, these theories, these documents, etc., I then try to kind of hash out what I'm trying to learn about this subject. So it helps me to kind of draw lines or connections, which lead to then a particular type of insight that I'm not always used or know what I'm going to find beforehand. So it's a collection of perspectives that is found through a type of research that is an assemblage, that creates an assemblage of different objects, which then are juxtaposed and connected. So inside a particular infrastructure, lately I'm mostly using the platform Neo Art City, which is a platform created by two old students of my close friend Andrew, Don and Sammy and Ben, actually it's three, based out of San Jose, used to be in San Jose State University. You can create, I wouldn't say it's a world, it's a space, and you can position all these different objects in there. So I can create kind of this like living, evolving repository of thoughts, objects, documents, files, etc., which then, unlike traditional archives or collections, kind of aim to not preserve an historical accuracy, but kind of make this dynamic, continuously growing storage space where my materials are just kind of kept and I can re-engage and interpret them. So yesterday, Yannis, we had a short conversation. You said to me, actually, I think we're all archives. Our lives are just archives. And I said, like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I do not disagree, but at the same time, now we're in this archiving care workshop. And in this particular dedicated environment, I don't think this is the way we should approach this. I think we need to kind of define better what is an archive. I think an archive is actually maybe sometimes starting as accidental, as you mentioned, but then once you realize an archive is purposefully made, it is created, it has a purpose. And so for me, while our lives, well, we're not thinking about them as archives, I don't think the way we think through, we don't give them a space as an archive, they are not archives yet, only poetically somehow. So I've been wondering, and I have this question that's been, I have a few questions throughout this talk, but one of them is like, what is actually the difference between a collection and an archive? And the collection may be made for studying things and displaying it, while the archive is kind of a place to preserve and maybe slightly more dead, although not always dead. This is actually my old blog, of which many links are dead. So it used to be a collection of thought, and it's now no longer used. So I would like to call it like an archive of my old research. But I'm not, so it's kind of like changing from a collection of thoughts towards an old research archive. But I don't know, like I'm very open to discussing these things. I'm just putting some thoughts forward, how, collections, archives kind of like weaver into each other. I also think that some archives may be just partially dead. So this is my collection of hard drives. I had to pull them up for an archiving project I'm working on. And some of them are dead, some of them I have no idea what's on them. And so they've been in the closet for many, many years. I think these are kind of like zombie archives in their own right. Then there are also the truly dead archives, or collections that maybe live in archives, such as in this case the delicious bookmarking site that is now accessed via the Internet Archive. And this is kind of like, okay, so archiving is really a situation of life and death. So this is a joke, but I'm not so good at jokes. Okay, so there are living collections I maintain on some platforms such as Vimeo or YouTube or Flickr, of which actually I'm aware I'm only partially in control. So then I'm thinking, archives and collections also make us or request us to ask questions about access, about ownership, formatting, hierarchy, and control. So here in the background, you see a screenshot of my Flickr page. Flickr is, for those who don't use it, it's an uploading site for photos. There's some important metadata here. I have uploaded since 2007. My public number of images is 11,884, but privately there are over 20,000 images. I publish everything under the Creative Commons license, and I also post everything ever online, mostly Creative Commons, but I prefer to use another license, which is Copy It Right, because I don't believe that anyone actually understands what any of these licenses mean, but to me they mean fair use, or like Copy It Right means you're gonna make money of it, please buy me a cup of coffee. All these images are also used on my website, so I embed them with an embedding tag. So I'm completely dependent on Flickr for the future of my website. And I'm aware that people told me in the early 2000s, like, if you're gonna make an archive, if you're gonna put anything online, you better keep your authority over it. Okay, so that brings us to some questions of access and control. And recently I was actually in conversation, in dialogue with George Oates, who is from the Flickr Foundation Lifeboat. I'm gonna read this as kind of a shortened version of what is on their mission statement, let's say. Just think about how many services have removed or sunsetted since the web began, and how much of our content and culture has disappeared. It's all at risk. Today, Flickr holds tens of billions of images documenting our planet from the first days of photography to just a moment ago. SmugMug, who is the company that has now bought Flickr from Yahoo, believes that the collection and of photography in general is an incredibly important visual record of our history. And just like any responsible ship builder, they acknowledge that there is a risk, however small, that the ship could go down. Simply admitting this might happen and prepare us in some type of form of conservation. So we want to shore up our vast and unique visual commons so it's accessible for over 100 years. So their plan really is to make a lifeboat to save Flickr images for a century, right? They call this the data lifeboat. It has some collection, they don't know how many, of the 50 billion images that have been uploaded to Flickr. Imagine that, 50 billion. So they ask, what would we get rid of first? What happens to the things no one ever wanted or watched? Because there's tons of images no one ever watched. Like there's tons of YouTube videos that no one has ever watched, right? What is the last thing you get rid of when you have an archive? I think these are beautiful and terrible questions all at the same time. They're also about care again. So Flickr, fascinating. People like to hate it, I love it. I'm stuck with it for now. We're talking, she asked me if I could be there for their Flickr meeting for building the life raft. I'm not sure yet, but what I do know is that there's some very interesting pieces of recent history also with Flickr. For instance, here we have the Yahoo Flickr Creative Commons 100 million data set. Kind of not really a white paper, but some type of white paper. This was from a group of people who, out of the goodness of their heart, scraped the whole of Flickr and made it usable for universities. And what happened then? We all know it, we've heard of this, right? This is when AI started to use all photos of Flickr to make their algorithms work, to train their AI image generating softwares. This is where it started. And what happens then? People like me, who've put their photos as Creative Commons, have been used in the scraping and then the training of AI algorithms, which happens to be, I still have my stupid vanity algorithms that when my name pops up somewhere, I get a message, so I got this one. This is a weird thing. This is generated by the Rosa Menkman filter, or Rosa Menkman prompt, and this is what they got. So, kind of an ownership issue, right? This is, how do you say, like a Spanish student who created an AI-generated paper with AI art, but they used my name, and they generated all the explanations of the art, also with ChatGPT. So now we get this like moment where I am in people's art projects created by AI, but not only my name, not even my birthplace is like the right birthplace, by the way, only my age and how do you say, my name are correct, and the rest is all made up by AI. So what we get here is really the crisis of the image, right? Like if my name now pops up with presented with art that is not mine, but that is inspired by my work, that is absolutely weird. So there is this crisis in the image, or what even is the image here? It's like past this post-digital crisis where we had to redefine like the digital image. Now we have a whole new image, which is, or a whole new crisis, which is about fidelity, truth, provenance, value, etc. So I'm realizing all these, and I'm trying to archive my own research-based practice, which now becomes more and more important because, you know, like everything is everywhere and everything is different. And at the same time, everything I make myself is completely intertwined with my own life, where everything is messy and lost and misused and broken. And so care has slipped in, it's in my life, but it's also all over the place. So now I invite people to my living room and I just put all my errors there. So I just wanted to put clear, like we're now entering my living room. And it's about this, like, if everything gets mixed, if my life is getting mixed with everything that is not mine, but all other AIs, then I don't know, all I can do is bring you straight home, basically. That's all I got to offer. So at the same time, I'm also still a researcher of resolutions. So I'm doing a research-based practice, and I'm trying to build new frameworks for that because I do have to kind of present my work in ways that still make people understand and see what it's about. So here we go. I try to build another kind of tool or hellhole of deprecation. I'm trying to build my new website in which I'm showing all my research. So, Juno. Here I'm also thinking, if I build a new framework and I make sure that all the work that I've done in the past fits more and closer together, maybe I can somehow stitch it together, people understand, like this cannot be a Rosa Menkman work because it just doesn't fit into her work. So I'm trying to build these like real frameworks, which are like kind of stories, ontologies of resolutions. So this is, what I'm trying to build is an atlas of the destitute of vision, the loss of vision, the loss of resolution, let's say. And in that framework, you have 6 chapters. You have one about time, you have one about material, genealogy, skill and scope, habit and crisis. And there's only one protagonist. Throughout all my work, which has always been there already for 14 years, it's the angel of history, which we also heard Alessandro already mention. And her mission is to unlock new ways of seeing throughout our technologies. And that is what resolution studies also is. Just for those who are not familiar with the angel of history, I don't know if, I mean, okay, good. I will do it for you, Diana. This beautiful creature on the left, she's my love, pride, and joy. She is a painting, actually a monoprint by Paul Klee. In 1920. In 1940, so we're going ages back, a century, full century. In 1940, Walter Benjamin wrote a thesis, mostly featuring her. It was a thesis on the philosophy of history. He describes how we're seeing, how we're using history, how we're writing history, right? So There he describes that the angel of history is pulled towards the future. She can only see the collapse of the past, which is the it's the First World War, sorry. You know. So Benjamin sees all the historicism, right history, and he's like, you're all very progressive, you're all writing about the future being only getting better, but you're actually writing all the collapse out of history, and my angel can only see the collapse and what we've lost along the way. And I think this is a beautiful thing, because this is still how technology works, right? Technology, we're still thinking that technology, or most people still believe that every update is an upgrade. But actually, with every update, we're just losing and deprecating and pushing into obsolescence older standards. So for me, this is a very, let's say, like contemporary thought also. So one of the parts where he describes the angel is her eyes are staring, her mouth is open, her wings are spread. This is how one pictures the angel of history. Her face is turned towards the past, where she perceives a chain of events, catastrophes piling wreckage upon wreckage. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, and make whole what has been smashed. But as the pile of debris grow before her, skyward, a storm is blowing from paradise, and it has caught her wings with violence, propelling her into a future to which her back is turned. And this is the storm we call progress. Right. So, I've been, let's say, thinking of how this angel, after 100 years of flying into the future, seeing disaster upon disaster, would exist within the digital, right? And I've come across this beautiful book, Network Society, by Manuel Castells, sorry, in which he describes an ontology of time. So he writes about biological time, clock time, virtual time, and finally the time of the network. In the network, we're in this moment where everything is just coming at us, but it's completely asynchronous. We don't know what is post when. There is no more kind of present, there's no real future, and there's definitely no past, because things come at them in their own time, the moment they reach us. Castells writes this as timeless time. And if the angel of history would have come into this network and exists in timeless time, I think this angel of history might just turn around and see the future. So this is what I'm after. I want this angel that sees everything collapse. I want her to come to timeless time and exist there. I think this could be wonderful. So this is what's happening in resolution studies, and I wanted to take you through that real quick here. I don't know if I still know. I'm having myself there. Yeah, great. Right, so we have different chapters. We have a horology, in which, we have the angel of history saying goodbye to the signal Paul. Then we have a material research, which is the research that I've been doing in the realms of glitches. Also, the angel of history in a place called DCT world. So this is really a space of different types of layers of complexity. We're going from flat lands to more evolved 3D spaces. Then she goes through a genealogy in which she also meets all the other colored test cards. Finally, we are in the realms of scale. And recently, when I was visiting my beautiful Nîmes in Cyprus, I've been working on a place where the angel would actually meet timeless time. So where is timeless time in our reality? I found it around the corner. I'm not kidding. There's a beautiful experiment 100 meters further. It's called Cyclops. It's the Cyprus continuously, it's an acronym, continuously, now I lost the acronym, but it doesn't matter. They're watching for landslides. And how they do this by letting the Sentinel satellites watch the Earth with SAR, which is kind of like scanning, 3D scanning of the Earth, scanning the Earth and then seeing if things are changing. But this is really complicated because Sentinel satellites are in the atmosphere or above the atmosphere, which means time moves differently there. So they have to sync up. How do they do that? They do that with corner reflectors, these objects. These are corner reflectors. They're sprinkled all over Cyprus, and they let Sentinel satellites sync themselves in time and space. They're part of the Cyclops network. They call them the Cyclops objects. And so for me, this is the place where the angel who takes care of things broken gets to think and see the future by the eye of Cyclops. How beautiful is this? So here we are, resolution studies with the angel of history, going to watch the future. I just have to find where I am now. I'm here. I'm at the Cyclops. I was jumping ahead of time. I was first looking for a lot of Cyclopses. I found a few here in Cyprus, but this is the one that I finally found. Cool. Good. That is how I have shaped, how I'm shaping my own narrative to make it into a continuous archive, so that if people run into AI images that are not mine, they can simply say, well, that is just not part of Rose's network, story. So it cannot be her art. I don't know if this is naive. Everything I do is naive, so it's fine. Fourth and last chapter. I hope we still have the energy and the time. Okay, cool, thanks. The transfer data trust, which is what I just mentioned, the decentralized archive, which is another project I started. I was invited to by Transfer. Transfer used to be a gallery based out of New York, run by Kalani Nicole. The gallery since stopped functioning, but we are now taking care of the art we have made into the world together. So this is what it's about. Out of the realization that in the contemporary art system, artists are the ones with the least power over the valuation, the appraisal, the archiving, and also the presentation of their artworks. Most of the time, all of this is kind of like you put a work of art in the world and it just goes. You don't get any kind of say over the appraisal. Like everything just flows, at least in my experience. I can complain, but a lot of it is not really in my own hands. The transfer data trust evolved. So the transfer data trust is building a decentralized artist archive, or a toolkit for peer-to-peer conservation and care, which also includes posthumously. So I'm one of the founding members of the trust, and it's an artist-owned archive and cooperative, and also a value exchange network, which uses decentralized storage to ensure preservation and accessibility, to maintain and hopefully maintain for a longer time. Like I don't really believe that things last forever, but we're working on something that even if it breaks down, we've actually done our best to make it into a fully functioning archive. So the data trust manages the value of digital assets and offers an approach to art valuation, conservation and governance, which is supported by a network of stewards. So we have actually people we're working with, technologists, curators, engineers, collectors, researchers, archivists, appraisers, lawyers, administrators, and also institutions. MoMA, the Whitney, we have Christiane Paul. We have really, because Kalani is really good at building relations. She has a full team of people behind us. They have put dedicated time aside to work with us. And so while we're building these archives, we're also getting professional appraisal. We're getting all the access to how institutions before us have put art inside their archives. So it's pretty cool. I mean, you know, I know that we're all very, we don't believe anything anymore, but I'm very excited to at least try. So the key points of the Transfer Data Trust. It's a decentralized peer-to-peer storage network, which exists as physical nodes in the artist's studios, and also other entities, meaning other For instance, the NYU School in Tandem, or I think there's going to be a node in Miami and also at Gray Area. So we have multiple nodes all over. It's a non-profit cooperative trust, which means it's governed by the people that are in it, human actors, and also the rules, the agreements that we set up. So we're setting up an actual contract between us. And then there's a care protocol involving best practice of conservation and archiving of digital work. And we're creating toolkits and case studies, and we'll publish them in a repository that we're also governing ourselves. Right, so key components. Just to get a little bit more specific, we're trying to create a standardized model around which we will organize and archive our projects. So this goes on a NAS drive, which is basically a hard drive that you can connect to the internet. So it becomes its own server, which is connected to a peer-to-peer storage network. And we're not using a blockchain. We're only using a blockchain as a third version redundancy. So we run two redundancies, two securities between us by having these 10 nodes. We begin with 10 nodes set up, in which we store a copy of the active files and a zipped up checksum, version of our archive. So we'll run these physical nodes in our studios. And I already mentioned this, digital materials need redundancy. I mentioned it yesterday too, but that's okay. This is the hardware that we're working with. And then we have a model that is twofold. It is one, a platform cooperative, and then also a perpetual purpose trust. With trust, we mean a legal entity with separate, distinct rights. And so for this, we have a few lawyers that really help us set this out. This has to do also with taxes, with ownership, etc. So, this is a very complex, dramatic, beautiful scheme that basically sets apart three entities. It's the artist-owned archive, there's the business model, so how does the cooperative run, and then there is the interface. So how we're building it is a threefold space. We also have funding, quite nice funding. This is just a start. So I'm just saying, like, this, it's, as we already spoke about, these types of things, they can only happen if you have the financial backup and the methodology, then you can start to try to kick it off. But what we're doing with this money, it goes straight into paying the engineers and the software, etc. We're already only have a README online, but of course the point is that everything is open. We share all our builds. Our network is closed because we're running it between us, in the sense that everyone can, we have parts you can visit and you can see them online. Other parts that I want to keep private, I can keep them private by private IPFS network. But the node collection between the 10 of us, that is our group. But what we share makes it possible for other people to set up the same type of infrastructure. So in that sense, it's open, like software-wise. Okay, now it's getting a little bit more interesting maybe for us, but I just needed to introduce all that. Things we're working on, right? We need to standardize, like every artist studio that is working in this cooperative.
Sorry, can you explain the artist studio concept?
Okay, so basically what it means is that you as an artist have a studio practice. So I run the work that I make from my home. In this case, my computer is mostly my studio. But it means I have in my studio backups, I have working files, I have output that is rendered. All of that is a studio practice. So people that we get, like for instance, professional archivists, they come and they VPN into my computer, and we're really running through my machine. We're running through my backups, we're running through my working files, and we're running through the things that are rendered. And we are looking at them, so they are actually being able to pull them open, go into my studio, meaning they can go into my computer and see everything, every file. And then see, and we go through this, we are making a real methodology. That's why it's also so interesting that we're talking about these things. Like, what goes into this archive? You have to imagine, like, we kicked off 3 months ago. Like, it's not that we're there yet, but we have the set of archivists, we're building this file tree right now. So how do we all organize our studios then? What are the folder structures that are expected? Because these things, they need to be standardized some type of way. But also, like, how are we organizing metadata? So there's many types of ways to organize actual metadata. Here are just a few. So for instance, premise is the one that is being used by MoMA, but there's many others. Caitlin and I had a little conversation about that. You're familiar because you're from an institutional background. But what is fascinating is that there are so many different standards. We're trying to find the best ones and push them all together, right? So this is the one that MoMA is using. The Data Dictionary for Preservation Metadata is the international standard for metadata to support the preservation of digital objects and ensure their long-term usability. You can look them all up. It's fascinating that there's so many different standards, but it's also understandable because first we had ephemeral art, then we have media art, then we have and now we're getting to the place where museums like MoMA, they need to make best practice for their 3D objects that they buy. They might have to they buy a virtual object, say a filter, face filter. They need to have a way to catalog that stuff. That is not just about the filter. They have to catalog in what software and hardware it was built, in what software built it was exported, if they then edited it again and put something else more in it. Like, there's iterations of the work. And so these types of methods of work are not normal in normally cataloged MoMA art. So they have to build out strategies for this. So we're just borrowing that. Like, this is another intake questionnaire for the Thoma Foundation, which is about software-based work. These things are fascinating. I have it also here. It's like, it doesn't say, but I believe it's over 20 pages. So much stuff to describe for one work of art. So, we're wrapping up. Sorry for taking so long, I don't know. Thoughts about care. Maria Puig de la Belle Casa writes, there's 3 dimensions of care: labor work, affect or affections, ethics and politics. But care is an ambivalent issue. It's always pointing, though, to some form of responsibility. I put some feedback. You asked, where does the care come from? But I also think what's important is who cares for who receives care or who does not receive care. I think when we're going to talk about care, I think these are very important questions too. I made a little, from all the inspiration of the last talks, excuse my Venn diagram skills, but I think it looks quite cute. I made a little Venn diagram for the context or purpose of archiving care. There's different places that are just like archives, but just a little bit different. And I think that is interesting to kind of position them all together and see where they weaver in and out of each other. A collection, a library, an archive, a gallery, a museum, a repository, a dataset, a database. They all serve a little bit of a different purpose. But it can be that a repository also is an archive, or that a museum holds an archive, or that, I don't know, a gallery becomes an archive, right? There are these weird mixes between them, and I think from the mixing we can see what is and what isn't an archive. So finally, question, are artist studios, library archives. This must have been a head thought. The difference between the artist archive and the artist's archive. Okay, this was definitely a brain fart. So how does mutable art, or art that is liable to change, exist within an archive or a collection? Maybe by collecting different instantiations. I think that was it. Yes, we're here. Cool. So let me go to my last thing. What because now I'm really talking about archives, collecting, etc. But what remains for me as my own, I keep making work. There are, of course, a few questions that are unresolved. What do I do with the backstories that I never disclose? They are not going in the archive, but they are part of my work. How can I, as a research-based artist, capture or update the essence of a living archive after the work has been bought or sold? In essence, I think what we're looking for is where or how does an archive begin or end? And what parts of me are inside the archive when the archive is me? So that's where I finish my talk. Are there any questions?